Hello and welcome to In the Making, a series of conversations from North Bennett Street School where we connect with a range of new voices, fields, and perspectives. Before we get into our conversation, I want to recognize and thank the Dora Foundation and Eaton Vance for making this program possible. Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Kristen Odell. I'm an NBSS staff member and host of In the Making. Today, we are on location at Geppetto in Cambridge, Mass., the newest restaurant from Chef Will Gilson. Thank you for letting us crash your space. It's beautiful. You learned about food and farming at the Herb Lyceum, your parents' farm in Groton, Mass.
Yep.
You learned hospitality at Johnson and Wales in Providence, Rhode Island. And you learned the trial by fire restaurant industry with your flagship space at Puritan and Company in Inman Square, Cambridge. I'm sure many people know that beautiful space. We're now at Geppetto, which is surrounded by two of your other spaces, the Lexington and Cafe Beatrice over here. And we're in this complex that you created, this restaurant complex that you opened in the midst of the world shutting down. Tell us about your decision to do that, to build a complex, and then tell us about Geppetto, where we are now.
Yeah, so thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be a part of this, and thanks for coming by the shop here. When we opened Puritan, it was the end of the sort of financial crisis. And, we had opened up a restaurant in a neighborhood that was not used to having sort of fine dining. And I think in some ways we always are a little ahead of the curve of where we are at that moment and where we're headed. And that can be a challenge, but it also can have rewards. So being in that restaurant space allowed us to get in touch with the developers of Cambridge Crossing, this new development down here by Lechmere Station in Cambridge. And we worked on this project for 4 years, and we had tried to create essentially a restaurant space where it could grow with the development. So as more people started to work here, more people started to live here, we could add different parts to the space. And so that's why we put 3 restaurants in one building, because the restaurant industry is, let's say, unpredictable at best. So you never really know what's going to work. And so coming down here was an opportunity for us to really kind of create a new restaurant concept where it could be multiple different things all at the same time. It could be able to work with having, whether it be employment shortages, we could be able to have people shuffle throughout the building. We could have people who reach their glass ceiling in one part of it and want to enter into another. And then rather than grabbing one person's meal once a week, once a month, once a year, we could try to be a market to somebody where they could get 3 different experiences from us in the same building, all in the same week, even in the same day if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And so that's how we end up here.
Even within your own business practice, you've created your own sort of ecosystem here. I love the idea that you just said of if somebody wants to sort of progress onto, into Geppetto or the Lexington and learn new skills, maybe that's kind of an ecosystem here for them.
It is. I mean, we've been open for 1 year here, and that 1 year took us the entire year to open up all 3 spaces. But we've had someone who's worked for us in all 3 and grown and risen in the ranks here while doing so. And I think that is, I look at myself as, the years that we progress and the team progresses, burnout, is something that you see people, they get sick of doing the exact same thing all the time. Restaurants are all about creating largely the same thing with consistency over and over and over again. And it can be pretty boring to do that. So if you can take somebody who's very, they've learned your standards, they've learned your systems, they like working for you as a person, but they're just burnt out with the work, well, we can move them to a different part and they can be able to feel re-inspired, take some of the things that they've learned in other parts and apply them to the new parts that they're working in.
Side note on that burnout on like menu and making the same thing over and over again. How frequently do you switch up items like that just so that you all are being able to flex your creative cooking skills?
I'd say historically, we always just say we do it seasonally. We wait until sort of, it's a new season of produce, a new season of, how people dine, whether they want their food to be a little bit colder versus a lot hotter. But nowadays, what we do is we try to look at product mix. We try to see what's selling and what's not. I mean, every menu needs to have something that is selling the least. If it all sold incredibly equal, then that would be impossible. You would just have one thing that you were selling all the time and everybody's getting the one thing. you'd be,
that would be insane.
You'd be the first iPod,
crazy.
Exactly. But, since then, what we have to do is take a look at what people aren't ordering and how it falls into it. When we first opened here, we actually we did town halls with the people who live in the neighborhood. And we said, what type of restaurant are you looking for? What are the type of things that you think are not available to you around here? And then once we opened, we went back to that exact same group of people. We did have to bribe them with gift cards, but we gave them a survey and some questionnaires to basically say, what are we not getting right? What are we getting, what can we do better on? And what would you like to see us do? And of that, a huge sample set of people replied, and that allows us to have them feel as though they're influencing their neighborhood experience.
So you crowdsourced your menu in a way, but from the locals.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there one thing that everybody was like, you got to have this? Tomato soup. You have to have tomato soup.
The weirdest thing I heard in a restaurant that was supposed to be a bakery, cafe, an American brasserie, and then an Italian restaurant was somebody who was asking for sushi. And then we sort of moved past that one. But the thing we actually hear more so is the feedback of something that they really liked that we had on the menu that we took off, which I think is always, there's always the stories of Gordon Hammersley back in the day at Hammersley's Bistro. He could never take his chicken off the menu because everybody loved that. And for us, it's like more subtle of Brian Mercury, our pastry chef, had these breakfast cookies. And the only thing about it that's breakfasty is it's, got like seeds and nuts and, oats and then peanut butter in it. And, sometimes it just wouldn't sell that well. And you're like, all right, nobody's getting this. And it's the number one thing that people request to have come back.
Wild. Wow. That's crazy. Let me ask you, tell us about Geppetto. What is this food all about? Yeah,
so Geppetto, the space that we're in right now, is actually the last concept in our Lexington complex here that we built. And the problem was we had to sit on this concept for a full year. We opened right at the thick of the pandemic, and this just didn't pencil. People were not dining inside, as close as we are right now. It just didn't make sense. And it was an intimate restaurant, and we just needed it to feel intimate, and it was too hard to do that. So we waited until we were in a better place to do it. But Geppetto to me was always supposed to be kind of a return to the first food that I ever cooked. The first job that I ever had working in a real restaurant was a restaurant in the North End on Salem Street called Marcuccio's. And
they still there?
They're not there. Yeah. No. That restaurant has turned into many different things since then. But when I was in high school, I worked in that restaurant, and it was all Northern Italian food cooked by Chef Chuck Dreggy there. And I absolutely, that was my red pill, blue pill moment with the restaurant industry, where, I took the one that made me feel like I woke up in this industry and I appreciated everything about it. And that was great. And so, my food has always had maybe some nuances of a, Northern Italian cuisine in it. When we got here, this was an opportunity to kind of put our foot down, and, opening any restaurant is scary. You're trying to open up something where you're, either borrowing money or, courting investors to be able to do it, or putting in your own, money to be able to do so. With this, we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to create something very unique, very cool, but also very different than our other concepts. And we didn't want to open up, just the same restaurant a mile down the street from Puritan. We wanted to open up something where people would come for a completely different reason. And so here we are with Geppetto. All the pasta's handmade. Everything is,
and we're going to see some in a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
And just for our guests, I don't think I made this clear. We're at Cambridge Crossing, which is behind. Can you give us your description of the geolocation? Yeah. So Cambridge Crossing is hence the crossing part of it is this touches Cambridge, Charlestown, and Somerville. It's sort of at the junction of all those. And this is actually where Cambridge was founded in the 1600s. So this was called Newtown, way back when. Yes. And we're behind Lechmere. What will be Lechmere Station.
Yep. So the new Lechmere Station is being built right next to us over there. But we are, probably a 5-minute walk from the Museum of Science. We are a 3-minute walk from the Cambridge Side Galleria, and another 3-minute walk from the Cambridge Courthouse. I have a lot of questions for you, but one that you just reminded me of, your background is actually in hospitality. Well, you went to Johnson and Wales. You studied hospitality. What was your moment like, I'm not going to do hospitality. I'm
in the restaurant business all of a sudden?
When I finished up, when I was finishing up at Johnson & Wales, I actually won a scholarship to study wine in California, Italy, and France. And it was an all expenses paid trip to go to some of the best vineyards, some of the best restaurants, some of the most awesome places for food and wine in all of America. And I always thought I'd be a hotel person. I loved being in hotels. I love that feeling of what it's like having a guest experience from check-in to check-out. And
let me pause, because you mentioned this to me before, that came from traveling with your family, and you just loved the experience of being in these hotels and being taken care of.
I thought it was the most amazing thing, whether it was the Dolphin Hotel in Disney, or whether it was like, the Holiday Inn in, Poughkeepsie or something like that. I just always thought that going to hotels was a fun activity for me. But, it was that trip where I was watching these chefs have the connection to the wine, to the food, to the guest experience, that I really just wanted that. I wanted to create a place where I could do it my way, the way that I thought that people would really appreciate, and that it could kind of be a place where, every day I went to work, it didn't feel like work.
And you figured out a way with this complex here to combine the two. And you said this earlier, you feel like this is more of a hospitality experience than anything. The food is killer, but.
When we were pitching this to investors and to the developer here at Cambridge Crossing, we said we wanted to build a hotel without rooms, and everybody went, what does that even mean?
What does that mean? Yeah.
And we just said, well, what's the best part about when you go to a new city? Like if you go to the Ace Hotel in New York, the fact that there's rooms upstairs could almost be inconsequential. Like everybody's meeting in the lobby, everybody's co-working, they're going and getting their coffee at one place, they're getting a drink in the lobby at another part, ending up with dinner in one place, maybe oysters in another. Like it's just, you bring all of these different people together in one place. An incredibly hard thing to do during COVID times, but still the design of this, and when we met with our architects, Roadie Architects to do this, we said it needs to feel like you walk into a lobby of a hotel, and from there, a host can ask, are you dining with us in our cafe, in our bar, or in our restaurant? And in that, we were able to create 3 distinct dining spaces in one space.
Yeah, it's more of a nexus than, a hotel.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to align cooking and hand skills with, North Bennett Street School, where we teach hand skills based trades. And in my opinion, and probably to most, cooking and baking and farming is just as much hand skills based trade as carpentry, locksmithing, or violin making. In your mind, how would you align those things?
I'd say yes, with the exception of the fact that oftentimes we have to make our product exactly the same every single night for a different audience. In farming, you have a standard of trying to create something that grows, that can be wildly influenced by seasons, by weather, by the time that you put it into the ground. And sometimes it's a gamble. And I think if you're making something like, what you guys make at North
like
Bennett
violin,
Street,
for instance,
violin or cabinets, there's one particular way that it should be made, and you have to learn how to make it specific and precise. Now, maybe someone can have design influence to it, but for us, when we create a product, it's about balance. And it's also about personal taste. Somebody might say they want their violin to look a certain way, but I might have somebody saying, if I eat this product, I'll die. And so we have to kind of tune our instruments, if you will. Yes, we have to tune our instruments into accommodating so many different personalities, so many different allergies, restrictions, but even just someone's fundamental approach to food. Like if they can go to food and feel like it's taking care of them, it's not just sustenance, but it's enjoyable. But someone might have a emotional attachment to a dish. They might remember trying it when they were on their honeymoon and say like, oh, I remember it's going to taste just like this. And if it doesn't taste like that and I'm competing against a memory, it's very hard to get past. However, I can create someone's first memory with something, and then they're always trying to get back there. So in some ways, you're playing God. In other ways, you're just trying to keep up with the Joneses.
I had one of those memories as a child, and it was the most basic. It was cheese tortellini with the most boring red sauce, but it was along a canal in Venice, and it's forever the best meal I've ever had. What was yours?
My mom used to take frozen tortellini out of a bag, boil it, dry it, and put it into a cast iron skillet with brown butter and sage leaves.
What?
And I remember, and still to this day, like if I'm having a tough day, I make that, you know?
I mean, that's brilliant. I've never even heard of anything
it was
like
always
that.
just like a super simple thing. And in some ways, I've been known for now sort of New England food, and, my heritage of a 13th generation New Englander is, kind of prefaces the press kit, if you will, of like where I'm working.
Mhm.
But my grandmother was Italian, and I grew up eating her food. And she went through a period of time where in the 80s and 90s, everything was about trying to remove fat from food. And so I never really got to enjoy the parts of it that I like the most.
No.
But
a lot of margarine?
A lot of margarine, a lot of grape nut crusts on pies and things like that. Yeah. Not as enjoyable as you would think. But, as the years have ticked on, my mom has started cooking more and more like that. And I think that's the fun part is some people get into the food business because of their childhood memories with food and whether or not their family cooked. And in many ways, mine was kind of in the absence of that. I had two working parents who were farmers, and in a lot of ways I had to kind of learn how to fend for myself. So I would take something that I had seen or had tried or wanted to do, or that simple memory of my mom busily trying to take frozen tortellini out and put it into a pan and turn it into something special. And that kind of became my way of entering into the food world, was, first kind of understanding it from a farming standpoint, but then from an enjoyment.
So back to hand skills. I mean, I see you as a chef, you are that's a hand skills based trade. I'm going to segue that into the conversation of automation. We've talked about restaurants that are using automation, but what are other areas in which the food industry is incorporating automation to sort of take away from like the craft of cooking something for someone?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you can Google a bunch of different articles about like, Spice the robot that like, takes food and mixes it into, sterilized containers and puts it into a bowl. And, as a chef I used to work for used to say, NASA makes a pill for that if that's all you're interested in, and I think it comes down to whether or not the person whose food that you're trying, you trust their hands and you trust the way that they approach food, that's, where we still have not been replaced. The automation that I think that we're seeing more now is replacing the hospitality and the personality behind it, where if someone can sit on their couch, order food from their phone, and a stranger brings it to them. And, in a hospitality based industry where we want people to see that like we've used our hands to build parts of it, to decorate parts of it, to pick the wines, to pick the foods, to make the foods and do that handmade, it can be very difficult to feel like someone just wants it put into a box and brought to their doorstep. And that was one of the hardest things about COVID. I mean, if you weren't able to get past that, you might not have survived as a business during COVID. But if you were able to kind of compartmentalize that aspect of it and say, this is what is keeping us alive, but it's not what I want to do, then just a matter of time as to when you got back there. I mean, when we opened Geppetto, it's only been 2 months, but we haven't served any food to go. Whereas we launched the concept as a to-go concept first because we needed money. We needed to keep the lights on.
A lot of restaurants did that, and it was brilliant. I mean, I was picking up packages of pancake mix at Ledger in Salem, and it was heaven, you know? But mostly mostly for you, I mean, it affects just hospitality in general, but we're talking jobs, your company, right?
And, we've seen in some ways, the natural urge to replace our guest-facing cashiers with people's ability to order. And you can put a QR code on the table, and to an extent, that's technology and automation where someone can take a look at the menu, order the food. On their phone, they could probably even look up a term that they don't understand rather than asking, a server. And that's the thing. Some people are very okay with that. And some people who design that tech say, well, this is the future. This is how it's going to go. But I tell you what, the moment that I could get the QR codes off the table and I could put printed menus back down again, and people could come in here and they could even just say, cook for me, I trust you, was when it felt like we were back to where we wanted to be.
Yeah.
And that has been one of the more rewarding things about being where we are right now. Every day is still just as unpredictable as the last, but the thing that we can at least count on is that people want to come out, they want to eat the handmade food, they want to trust you again, and they want human interaction again.
Yeah, human interaction is huge. So I want to reference something that you've said to me before about your holistic view of your business here, how it's not, I'm trying to tie this into back what you're just saying. How it's not just like this whole thing does not work just because of your skills. It's the holistic approach. It's everybody in the process, you trusting other people, being open to creative ideas. And I'm trying to turn this back to what are some of the things that you did to get through that challenging year? You made meals for
homeless
shelters.
Yep.
Just to like navigate the way. And so I'm just trying to construct this blobby question for you if you want to hit on all those points.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we were talking about was, everybody responded to the pandemic differently. And, for us, we could have said, all right, we're not finishing this restaurant project. I mean, we were supposed to open in June of 2020, and we had the restaurant 50% built by March of 2020 when everything shut down. And, we closed our restaurant Puritan. We laid off our entire staff there. We gave all the food and the walking away to them. We made sure that they got, had assistance with getting on benefits. We just did all the things that we could do to try to just survive. But once that part was over, we could either just kind of shelter in place, or it was, let's just keep going. And in some ways, your own therapy and maybe your own, psychosis can be it was a lot easier to put our heads down and run through walls than it was to sit there and just wallow in being like, well, man, if this hadn't happened, then this would be the outcome.
Right.
Whatever happened, and it's still with us now. So, giving up is the only option unless you're going to kind of keep pushing forward. And so for us, when we got to the point where people weren't dining out anymore, it seemed like we had to put things into go boxes to be able to survive. We decided to launch Geppetto as a takeout only concept with a very small menu, with nothing that I actually wanted on the plate in this restaurant, but something that we felt that people would like. Brian, our pastry chef, made this amazing Sicilian style sourdough pizza, and it's still sold in our cafe today. When we were making, pastas here, they were with dried pastas because we knew that they could hold up longer and somebody could reheat them and it would travel well, and we had to get the right packaging for it. But at the same time, while we were doing that, and that could still feel like we were doing handmade stuff and it was in our control, we were working with the city of Cambridge we did 20,000 meals for homeless shelters from the start of the program with them to the end. And that was about 8 months. We were, trying to
You were hired to do that. It was just, right? You were paid to do that.
We were paid to do that. Yeah. But they were city contracts. You had to bid on them every single week. It was never guaranteed that you were going to get the same one that you got before. And, the same way that I'm trying to sell a $25 plate of pasta right now, I had to try to figure out how to make a meal with a starch, a vegetable, a fruit, and a protein for $5.25. That was what I built. So and that was what we had to completely change what we knew how to do.
Yeah.
We were making food for a restaurant down the street that was delivering food to people's houses in like Christmas time for like gift baskets. And that was just what we had to do to survive.
Creative problem solving.
Yeah. And it was just because you worked so hard to get here. You could just say this problem arose and now that problem's to blame. But in the end, no one will remember that it was that took you away. There'll just be something else here to replace you.
Yeah.
And, for us, it became an opportunity to develop relationships with our neighbors. We were in a food desert over here. We were at the time the only retail to open. And so the relationship that I was talking about with crowdsourcing what type of restaurant we wanted to be, we were able to say, please support us and please help us and tell us what we can do for you. Call down here. Do you need a lemon? You don't want to go to the grocery store? Like, we'll put it on with your order.
Which, speaking about being, new to a neighborhood, let's go to Puritan and Company. You were a rebel when you opened that space in a neighborhood that was not ready for it. I mean, what was that like?
We opened Puritan and Company in the fall of 2012. And we opened it up in Inman Square. And at the time, Inman Square, the only restaurant that you could probably say that was close to kind of doing fine dining was Oleana, which was in a completely different kind of portion of it, and over on Hampshire Street, and East Coast Grill, which at its time was on its like 24th year. And so we were the new kid on the block, and we were like, we're going to do this restaurant where, all the stuff were antiques that I stole out of like my parents' house. And, we were going to have, wines that were up to, $180 a bottle. And we were going to have, entrees that were, Wagyu beef for $38. And we were going to have this really great, beautiful menu. And nobody liked it when we first opened. I remember, the first couple of weeks that we were open, someone wrote on the back of a receipt, like, congrats on the open, you're going to close. And nice. And I remembered that moment as this type of thing where, like, is this for you or is this for them? And who are you doing this for? And I think that, that feedback that we were able to get, we still listen to now, and being more tapped into it now helps. Where are you doing this for your own ego? Are you doing this to be selfish? And you say, like, no one understands my craft, my food, my cuisine. Right. Or are you saying, like, I am essentially a public service to the people in this neighborhood.
Yeah, you're occupying space in their community.
Yeah. And they can either tell every single person when they walk by your restaurant or your business that they don't like you, or they can say, that's the place that does this that I really love.
Yeah.
And it takes a while, courting your first guests until you have, that was like my first real restaurant that was mine. And, until you can establish a reputation where people know what they're going to expect when they come to one of your places, which is then a standard that you have to adhere to. People, it's like dating, like you're sitting across from somebody and they're trying to figure out what they want to make of you.
Do they like this vibe in here? Yeah.
And you know what? Not all dating turns into marriage, so I mean, I think that there's a lot of that. And we look at it now, and we still have new customers coming almost 10 years later at Puritan. And I don't know a single person in the dining room. And that is a great feeling. Yeah. Like, as much as I love seeing the same people, it's unsustainable to have your business just be the same people. I mean, like, you can't be a musician and go to a concert and have the same guests travel from city to city to city.
Although they do.
They do, but like not in mass enough to make it worth your while.
Right.
And so, you can look at restaurants as it's a chef's art form. It's their craft. It is, a place where people are making memories. But additionally to that, it's a business. And, you need to have those transactions in a frequency enough to make sure that it wasn't just this one-time thing that you did that everybody says, like, didn't the place used to be here that used to do that okay thing?
Right.
Like, it's about the continuation of it and the evolution of it.
I mean, full disclosure to our guests, I had my wedding reception at Puritan and Company, and everybody that was there, I mean, it's just memorable and just a beautiful, wonderful space. So, and I'm going to ask you about failure.
Yeah.
Okay. Getting somebody to write a receipt that said you're going to fail, you're not going to make it, learning the process of learning to take and pay attention to critique, all of those things. What is a great failure that you dealt with that reset your career?
So my first restaurant was called Garden at the Cellar, and it was right between Central and Harvard Square in Cambridge. And
loved it.
Thank you. And the funny thing is, in all the things that we've opened, that restaurant gets the most people saying that they loved it. But I started it as a pop-up. I was basically a subcontractor. I ran the kitchen, and somebody owned the bar that we were in. And so when you paid your check, like,
paying separately,
you paid one bill, but behind the scenes, we had to divide out how much was food and how much was beverage. And I was 23 years old. I had a chip on my shoulder and I thought that I could do it. And I was there for 5 years. I mean, this one thing that was me, the only person working in the kitchen and then washing all the dishes at the end of the night, turned into, a staff of 30 people and, this restaurant that was open lunch and dinner 7 days a week. And I absolutely loved that place, but it got to the point where it was never going to be mine. I was never going to be able to control all of the good aspects of it. I was only going to have to compensate for the negative aspects of it. And even though folks like yourself remember that place well and made memories there, I mean, my wife was in the hospital and the doctor goes, "You garden at the cellar?" This was like 2 years ago, and then that place had closed for me. And I walked away in 2011.
I mean, I watched your face train when I asked you about that. You're like, enough already.
Yeah. And I think what was hard is like, I had to realize what my shortcomings were there as a professional and as a business person. And, I walked away with debt and I took a controlled nervous breakdown. I moved to the Cape and opened up a pop-up restaurant down there for the summer, and then found myself sitting on a couch at my dad's house, drinking whiskey, eating Cheetos, and waiting for a phone call for somebody who said that they might want to open up a restaurant in Inman Square. And if it weren't for that, who knows where this story goes. But at that point, I realized that I needed partners. I needed people who knew how to do the things that I didn't know. I feel like, there's an arrogance to when you're a hands-on person that you can train yourself to do just about anything. But there's a point where you realize that, well, maybe this is my skill. Maybe this is my craft. Maybe these are my talents, but these things are definitely not.
Right.
And so knowing how to put yourself in a scenario where there were people that could fill in your gaps was what I knew I needed to do to be able to get what I wanted.
Yeah. I mean, that's a challenge for most of us, is just lining everything up and assessing your strengths and really pushing aside the things that you're going to totally wreck,
Yeah.
I mean, did you have a mentor? Do you rely on mentorship, or did you just have to step back and like see it all from the outside?
I mean, I had to have a nervous breakdown, basically. I had to feel like everything had been propped up to the point where I thought I was in control of it all, and then realizing that I was in control of absolutely nothing. And since then, it took a lot of years to rebuild that confidence that I had approached, that first restaurant with, where I just figured I was invincible and I could do it. And, as a chef, if you get a little bit of press young early on, I mean, that becomes, the high that you're always chasing, is that people want you to do the next big, wild, crazy thing. And so you're always trying to like up the ante, but there's a point where that becomes unsustainable. And I think that sort of led me to maybe the way that I approach things now, where I don't care about the accolades. I don't care about reading the things where someone says like, I had the most perfect meal at your place. If that is their feedback, then it means everything that we're doing is going well. It's the feedback that is negative that you can look at and you can establish the trends. You can say like, okay, well, every time, this person is working this station in the restaurant, someone's always complaining about the food being oversalted. So now you can go back, and that's data that you can use to identify what the problem is. If someone says every time I'm in there, like the hospitality feels cold, well then, all right, now we've got to do some work and we've got to train this. If you take that feedback and you say, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, they're an idiot, like everything we do here is great. Well, then all it takes is an accumulation of those negative experiences that people have and they share in a very public forum now. I mean, like their entire industry is built on Yelp, Google reviews. Like, I mean, and I would say this whenever I buy a product on Amazon, like I'm not the type of person who would leave a review, but I'm thankful for the people who do leave reviews because I read them and I use them. And I feel the same way. I don't review restaurants when I go out to them. I mean, how well does that sell if a chef's going around leaving public reviews for other people's restaurants?
Yeah,
like, it doesn't really work that way. But every time I go to a new city and I want to check out a restaurant, what I'm doing, I'm reading their reviews. I mean, I may have heard great things, but I want to see what people are actually saying, because an article can paint a very rosy picture about how somebody runs a restaurant. It's way different than what the actual end guest experience is.
These challenges that you've learned through this journey, how much, this is just a side question, how much do you equate to your education, your hospitality education at Johnson & Wales versus just being in the business?
I think one of the things that was the most helpful about going to school was seeing multiple different perspectives on an industry. Going to a hospitality school, probably no different than somebody going to, NBS, is that you get a chance to learn from people who have made mistakes. And, at a school like Johnson & Wales, there was a lot of people who had gone off in the industry on their own. They had either owned their own restaurants, they had owned catering companies, or they had been working in hotels and they were traveling and they got burnt out. And being in one place where they could teach and pass on the knowledge that they had, you also learn so much from them being like, well, I would never do this, or like, oh, well, the reason that I stopped doing this is that. And that feedback is incredibly helpful for understanding why you might want to get into it. I know it's everybody's job to kind of sell you on an industry, because like, if not, there's no feeder of like new enrollees into it. But I think that what you pay for as a student is the expertise of somebody's successes and failures who can pass them on to you. And I think it's no different than, me being a parent now, is that like, I try to make sure that I pass on my successes and failures to my kids in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And, you just can look at them, sort of pragmatically. But, travel and experiencing different things while I was at school was as equally as important to me as it was to hear someone's take on how everything goes. Being able to go to Europe and see how somebody makes wine so that you can actually experience it differently and talk about it differently is way better than just reading a review about a type of wine,
right.
Or reading like the characteristics of what it would be like.
Yeah. So lived experience, eating probably informs you more than anything.
I mean, like, you learn far more from tasting a dish of food at someone's restaurant than you do of reading a recipe and just making it how the recipe says.
Yeah. On that, what's your favorite cookbook?
Oh boy. I would say the one that I tend to come back to the most, and there's two very different reasons. There's one book that's called Essential Cuisine by Michel Bras. He is a French chef from outside of Provence area. And the book itself is maybe one of the most beautiful pieces of art I've ever seen. As a coffee table book, it is just gorgeous. It is impossible to find right now. It's like out of print. If you find them on eBay, they're like $500 a copy. And I still have one that I hold on to, which is really great.
You don't touch it when you're cooking, right?
Not when I'm cooking. This is not something that you actually cook out of. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's food porn,
Yeah.
And then I would say the one that probably has the most stains on it is Julia Child's, through first and second copies of Mastering the Art of French Cooking.
And you do a whole event around that, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, for now 8 years, we have done a Julia Child tribute dinner. We always do it in the summertime around her birthday, and we invite guest chefs from other restaurants. And we basically, the only criteria we give them is take your favorite Julia Child recipe and do your interpretation of it.
That's awesome. I love that. What are some challenges that you're just open-ended question, challenges in your industry right now that you're facing?
I mean, there are a lot of people who are having a reckoning about whether or not they want to work in the restaurant industry. I mean,
what is it?
The Great Resignation.
The Great Resignation.
Yeah. And I get it. For years, we've been trying to kind of keep up with what people wanted. I mean, I'd say in Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts area, we do a much better job than in probably some other parts of the country. It's a bit more fairer. We have paid family leave, which is a state thing. There's insurance that's sort of mandatory for groups over a certain size. So the ways of giving people sort of equality while working in a restaurant setting and some sustainability is much easier here. But that still doesn't counter for the fact that we've been a industry of transients for years. I mean, you take away during COVID, people going to in-person school, people moving with their, significant other or, for a job, and they needed to find something, or even just like, going to day or night school and having something to kind of offset that. You remove that entire transient population, that's like 50% of what restaurants staff themselves off of. And so that has been really, really, really hard. I think we're also seeing a ton of turnover. I mean, restaurants are almost at like 100% turnover every year. For every person you hire, there's somebody walking out the door, but I think a lot of folks don't really know what they're looking for right now. They don't know what, and there's so much opportunity out here. I mean, it's supply and demand.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if there's so much, supply and not a lot of demand, then people can kind of shop around and find what actually works for them. Do very much like a Goldilocks situation, you know? So that's, what we really need to try to figure out how to kind of combat.
So, but it's still sort of then here and locally and nationally, it's still just finding work, right?
Yeah,
it's
I mean, it's just
staffing.
it's finding people, it's finding staff. Sometimes it's finding the right staff. I mean, and it can be incredibly hard. If you're building, a cabinet and you need somebody who's a really good joiner, like you need to find a person who's a really good joiner. But sometimes you might have to take someone who's an okay joiner and train them to be a really good joiner.
That's true.
And it takes some time. And that's what's really hard with what we do now is you can take somebody who needs grooming, they need shaping, they need some time to be able to learn how to do it. And by the time you get them there, they're off onto the next thing. And so it's a lot of emotional and physical, personal capital that we're working on all the time to try to get there. And that can be really tough. It's why that there's a high burnout level right now.
Yeah.
We have an incredibly, heavy amount of burnout for, people who just made it through with us. I'm watching 3 of my top people at one of my restaurants all leaving within a 45-day period because they were like, well, now the place is fine. Now it's doing okay. And now we've got, everything stable. So you don't need me anymore. And I'm like, well, I do.
You're right. I think he's delivering some champagne. Oh, don't worry about it. You're fine. Oh, no, you're fine. You're totally fine. While we're pausing and laughing, I figured I would take this opportunity to mention that a graduate of North Bennett Street School now owns Blue Barn Builds and has done a lot of collaboration with you. Jay Hoynash.
Jay Hoynash came to, basically, I got put in touch with him after he built a friend's restaurant back in I think 2015. And I went to him with a problem. I said, I have this kitchen table that I'm looking to build and nobody knows how to get the dimensions right. And he came back and he made this thing. He over-engineered it. It probably weighs about 850 pounds.
And that's why I bring him up is that he trained as a violin maker and now works with massive steel, heavy, over-engineered structures, big, large, amazing.
And since then, Jay has been a part of every restaurant build that we've done.
So he's all over. There's NBSS all over this complex here. A sort of a fluke of a question. What is it about the restaurant industry that people in the industry are just addicted to? It's like
the best way I can ever answer that question is instant gratification. I think that one of the things can be very hard about any job is that you could spend days, hours, weeks, months, years working on something, and the end result might be something that is either not tactile, that people can't pick up, they can't feel, they can't understand, they can't ingest. And you might never meet the end user of the product that you create. And I think that at that point, you only trust your work. And, if you're good at that, then that becomes your baseline. The restaurant industry is a drug because of the instant gratification that you get. You can, in mere hours, take something that is raw and turn it into something finished and feed it to somebody and they can ingest it and enjoy it.
Yes.
And I think that is the thing that is the hardest for people to, sometimes it's the hardest to appreciate, but once you kind of understand it, then you're like, okay, this makes sense. But it's the hardest thing to recreate elsewhere. It takes musicians a while to write a song, but then they have to perform that song over and over again. And maybe they change it when they perform it live versus how they actually recorded it, which is no different than a chef making a really great dish and then having to recreate it over and over again. But you're creating it for a large audience, whereas in the restaurant industry, you might be creating it for a smaller audience.
Well, I mean, that connection point right there is kind of the reason for this program, is to remind everyone that, we at North Bennett, people come there to build things with their hands and have that tactile experience that is meaningful, that it makes a meaningful existence. And that the food you're eating, at a place like this, and many other places, somebody is building that with their hands, and that is something to appreciate and value.
Yeah. And I think that when, we are creating food experiences for guests, some of the reasons why we're seeing burnout is because everybody wants to make it their own. We live in an environment now in a society where like anything you want is at your fingertips, whether it be ordering the food that you want and having it delivered right to your home, whether it be a package that can be shipped to you in 48 hours and it shows up there and you never even had to do anything and all your bank card information is saved there. Everything just gets easy. But the best restaurants try to make it so that you forget that that's how that works. Like if, one of the folks here just went to New York and had a 3-hour lunch at Le Bernardin. And that costs a lot of money, but you can't have that sent to your home. You can't have that experience at your office. Like that can only happen in the doors of a restaurant. And like I said, when we opened our first one and we were trying to win over a group of people and have them understand what we were all about, that was hard. But once you do, we're at a point now where people come here and they go, oh, well, I've been to their other restaurant, so I trust this. And that becomes the way that you create end users who come back to you. I mean, as a craftsman in food, whether it be that or a craftsman creating a product like, your students make, you hope that the end user wants that product again. They come back to you again because they say, this person makes the best. The reason that Jay Hoynash keeps making things at my restaurants is because I trust him and I trust his process. And it's no different than the relationship that our guests have with us when they dine with us.
Yeah, it's so true. And there are no QR codes, right? Is that what they're called? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm tech bad.
Yeah. I mean, we have some when we do outdoor dining where it's just impossible to get somebody to you. And, we were spread out a little bit more.
But inside this space, no QR codes. You're going to speak to a person. They're going to tell you what's on the menu, what's seasonal, what you should have, what kind of wine
we are actually short a restaurant server right now, and so we are capping our reservations. Like we could be making much more money, be busier, reaching more audiences, but we don't want to give subpar service. So we don't want to give.
Jen and I can fill in today if you need.
Perfect.
Yeah, we're here.
Careful, as I won't let you leave.
So the last thing I just want to mention that Will built this space. You built this space to be able to offer something to everyone. You have a coffee shop where you can go get, piece of pizza or coffee. You have the Lexington upstairs, and you have fine dining in here. How would you? Well, the Lexington is kind of moderate, more casual.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we refer to it as an American brasserie that has a bar. It has a rooftop dining as well, and so during kind of the warmer period that we've had, the rooftop was incredibly busy. It's where people wanted to be. They wanted to be out in the sun. They also wanted to feel, safe. And I think with, this space, what we've tried to do is make sure that, saying that there's something for everyone always sounds very much like an Olive Garden tagline, but
a Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we really have tried to make it that way so that, if you're, just coming in here for your morning coffee, like we've got that for you. Like if you're working in one of the offices around here or you live here and you work from home and you want to place an order online and run in and grab it so that you can enjoy it, great. Or if you want to end your day at the bar with a drink and just a snack, you can do that. You can celebrate an experience there, or you can come here, share a pasta, or ball out and have a meal for two people that you can celebrate, a birthday with.
Yeah. Awesome. So you're going to show us something to make that uses some very basic ingredients that we all have access to.
Yep.
And for our guests, forgive the shimming of the camera. I'm going to slide this over, and Chef Will's going to show us how to make some pasta.
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
is it?
So we're going to be making agnolotti del plin. So agnolotti is essentially a kind of in a sense, a stuffed pasta, like a ravioli, but the shape of it, of del plin, is it kind of folded over on top of itself. And the pasta dough itself, which is already made, won't bore you with that whole process because it has to rest to be right, is really just egg yolks and flour. I mean, a little bit of salt, a little bit of olive oil, but the most simple of ingredients that we all have. And then we just roll it through here, and then we're going to fill it with some roasted pumpkin puree, and then serve it with mushrooms and shaved cheese and sage and brown butter.
Wow.
So kind of getting back to my mom's,
that is
my mom's tortellini,
yes.
They were just serving in maybe a more upscale way.
All right.
Yeah.
So give us a second, folks. And Jenna is with us. I'm going to give a shout out to Jenna Lemieux. She's doing the other camera work here. Also, while Chef is preparing this meal, if you have any questions for him, go ahead and type them into the Q&A window and I will shout them out to him. So what is this machine all about? This is your pasta roller?
This is a pasta roller, yeah. So this pasta roller right here, we actually had shipped from Italy. It made it through all of the supply and demand shortage issues and whatnot. And essentially what you just try to do is little by little put the pasta through to get it thinner and thinner and thinner. Time adjusting sort of one measurement.
Does it click or are you just slowly doing
Just slowly doing it.
So you can really make it whatever thickness you want.
Yeah, and if you go too thick, it doesn't do what it wants. If you make it too thin, it will rip or tear, or it will also overcook and explode.
Oh yeah.
So
All of the above has happened to me before.
Yes,
Making
yes.
pasta.
Making pasta can be a very rewarding thing. A lot of people who spent their COVID time making bread or making pasta at home, have sort of done this. So I'm just gonna put this aside for now.
And this machine came from Italy because you just cannot find this here.
You just can't get the quality,
Yeah.
Swiss watches, Italian pasta makers. We have an extruder in the kitchen.
What
And
is an extruder?
an extruder essentially takes the powdered dough of this process and it mixes it and then pushes it through bronze dies. This here. And so like if you ever have dried pasta, that's made almost
that's
exclusively
extruded.
with extruded pasta.
Right.
So that's how you get bucatini, that's how you get shells, macaroni, all that is extruded. Same thing, we had to get that from there because while there are companies who probably make it here, they just don't make it the right way.
Right.
All right, so what we're gonna do here.
And what all is in the, you'll tell us in a second, but what all is in the filling?
The filling is roasted kabocha squash. So that's, you can use butternut. I just like kabocha squash because it's a little bit drier than what most of the, butternut squash can be a little wet, but butternut squash is definitely more available.
Right.
If you wouldn't mind, if you reach in that drawer, you're going to find one of these guys that has a bit of a like almost straight right in the top
one?
drawer right there. Should be right there.
Right here?
Perfect. Great. Okay. Now,
There's the multi one.
so these also made in Italy. These are bronze dies.
These are, can I grab this?
Yeah.
This is a gorgeous tool. This definitely reminds me of some tools that we see on our benches. Actually, it reminds me of our bookbinding tools. I mean, that's just gorgeous. I just compared bookbinding to pasta making.
There are similarities, I wouldn't say that is
Yeah, that's not a stretch.
a stretch here.
So you only, what is that called? What is that cut called?
Well, we're just kind of perforating it, if you
Okay,
will.
there we go. And you only do it on one edge?
We do it on one edge, and I'll show you why. So,
Oh, pinking shears. I have pinking, in sewing, they're called pinking shears, make that same cut.
right. So, do here. So now we get ourselves our little sheet here. And the goal of what we're going to do here is we are going to roll this kind of over onto itself and then cut it out from there. So put this aside, we'll do an extra on that one, but this
Oh, what do you mean?
should be a knife.
Pastry knife or in
If
here?
you reach in there, there should
Oh,
be
there we
a
go.
knife. Perfect. So you can just scoop this out, but essentially what you're trying to do here is use a piping bag. So you can scoop it, but a piping bag works the best.
Quicker.
Use a Ziploc bag, put it in there, push a little bit of the air out and cut one of the ends off. It works just as all right. So what we do now is we place our filling right along here.
See, I would never think to put it on the edge.
Show you why. So do that. A little bit of water here. This will help it adhere to itself.
So just really appreciate your Husky Tool. Just plastic
Well,
counter
you know, the
there.
funny thing was when we bought the equipment, we were like, how are we going to keep the folks who don't know how to use this equipment away from them in the kitchen and like have it not break? You spend tens of thousands of dollars on pasta equipment. The last thing you want is that to kind of happen. So we were like, where are we going to put it? And so we were like, what if we just had a tool chest and we keep all the dies and everything in here so it all lives in one place? Open up that drawer one more time.
This main one?
Yep. And then I'll take this thing. Here we are. All right. So now what we want to do is essentially fold this over on itself. Okay. And the shape of the agnolotti del plin is that it folds over on itself, but then it folds over kind of again. And you'll see when I do the final cut, what it will look like. We've got that there. Push everything in. This seals in the filling. Okay. Now, roll it one more time. It keeps it there, and you leave just a little bit of edge here. Now we do seal that.
That seals it.
It seals the edge. And now we go through here. Use our finger. Push the filling away from the edges, and this makes the individual portions. So these little pillows become our end result.
Beautiful.
And then take our cutter, just go through just like that. This helps crimp it and seal all the filling inside. When we're done, our little agnolotti del plin
So beautiful.
ready to go.
Oh,
All right.
they're just little pillows.
Cool, huh?
So while we're looking at these, remind us, can we just recap how many total ingredients are in this? We have egg yolk.
We have egg yolk. We have pasta flour. It's like the type 00, very fine flour. We put just a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt in there, but you don't want to have too much. And then the filling is just roasted pumpkin. I do a little Parmesan cheese, a little bit of nutmeg. That's it.
Okay, so that's 7 ingredients.
Yep.
Yeah,
All stuff that you could buy at the local grocery store if you
Yeah.
wanted to.
that's amazing.
You might not have this equipment. And
No.
you can do it by hand. I mean, like there was a way that we did things before machines and
Yeah,
automation,
and
if you will,
GPS,
you know,
yeah.
exactly. And I think we actually have a finished plate of it right here. If
That's
you want to get a
wild.
chance to try it.
Sure, yeah. Unbelievable.
clear this off right here. And here they are. Serve
And
these with a little bit of,
with mushroom.
yeah, these are chanterelle mushrooms, brown butter, sage, and a little bit of shaved provolone on
Oh,
top.
and I see, is this olive oil drizzled over top?
Yeah, just a little bit of olive oil to finish it.
Okay, I'm just going in.
Do it.
Don't judge me. What is that? Mm-hmm. The butter.
Yeah, it's,
Mm.
I wouldn't say that it's light on the butter,
Mm-mm.
but what good is?
What good is, this is delicious. Thank you so much.
Oh, good, my
I
pleasure.
love it. And I'm gonna give Jenna some in a second. Oh, Jenna, you're on camera. I want to thank Jenna for being, Jenna Lemieux. She's also staff at NBSS. And she's our backup camera here. And thank you to you, Chef Will. It's been a real pleasure. And to our guests, let me see if I have any questions for you before we sign off. There might be one. Oh, tell us that book title again.
Oh, it is called Essential Cuisine by Michel Bras, and the last name is Bras.
Okay. And it might be like $500 on eBay.
Yeah, but
And don't use it while you're cooking.
yeah, the first time I saw it was at the Two Fat Ladies that were on PBS.
Mhm.
I was in Scotland at her bookstore, and she was like, "You have to look at this book," and it was absolutely beautiful, and it was all in French. And I was like, "I'm going to figure out how to get this book."
Mm.
And way back when, at a time when Barnes and Noble was a place that you would go to buy all of
Oh,
your
yeah.
books, I came back home from Scotland and I bought it there.
Ah, beautiful. Well, thank you. This is so delicious.
Yeah, of course.
I
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. And thank you to our guests, and we'll see you at the next In the Making. And we're going to sign off. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.